ever stopped and wondered how a simple piece of steel can become strong enough to, say, cut through other metals? Well, today, we're diving right into that process. It's part science and honestly part modern-day alchemy, where we use heat and controlled cooling to unlock the incredible power hidden inside of metal. So this is the big question, right? It all comes down to this puzzle, and the answer isn't that it's a different material. It's about a hidden power that we unlock from within, and by the time we're done here, you're gonna know exactly how it all works. All right, so here's our roadmap for solving this puzzle. First up, we'll get into why we even do this in the first place. Then, we're gonna break down the basic process, the heat and cool cycle. After that, we'll look at a few key recipes for strength. And finally, we'll zoom way, way in to the atomic level to see where the real magic happens. Okay, so let's get right to it. Why go through all the trouble of heating and cooling metal in these giant furnaces? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. It's all about unlocking its full potential and basically customizing it for a very specific job. And the transformation is, well, it's pretty incredible. You see, before treatment, a piece of metal might be soft, kind of weak, and easy to stretch into a wire. That property is called ductility. But after treatment, that exact same piece of metal can become incredibly hard and tough, able to withstand just immense force. So what exactly is heat treatment? The best way to think about it is like baking a cake. You don't just toss all the ingredients into an oven at some random temperature, right? No, you follow a very precise recipe with controlled heating and cooling to get that perfect result. It's a scientific treatment, not just heating something up. So how does this whole process actually work? It turns out that pretty much every heat treatment, no matter what you're trying to achieve, follows the same fundamental three-step cycle. On the surface, the process is deceptively simple. First, you heat the metal to a very specific temperature. Then, you let it soak at that temperature. And finally, you cool it down. Now, it sounds easy, but the real magic, the secret sauce, is hidden in the details of each of those steps. Let's just zoom in on that soaking step for a second. This is absolutely crucial. You're basically letting the metal cook at a constant temperature. This makes sure that the entire piece, from the surface all the way to the very core, is at the exact same temperature, which guarantees a consistent and reliable transformation throughout. But of all the variables, one of them stands out as the most critical. The one secret ingredient that determines the final outcome more than anything else is the cooling rate. Seriously, how fast or how slow you cool that metal, it changes everything. And by mastering that cooling rate, along with the heating and soaking times, metallurgists can follow different recipes to create metals with totally different properties. So let's take a look at a few of those. Now, what's really cool about this is how it kind of lays out the basic cookbook. If you want to make metal softer and easier to work with, you use a process called annealing, and that involves cooling it down very slowly. If you want to make it as hard as possible, you use hardening, which requires a super rapid cool. And if you need that perfect balance of hardness and toughness, you use tempering. Now, that rapid cooling process, that's called quenching, and it's just as dramatic as it sounds. You've definitely seen this in movies. The blacksmith plunges a glowing hot sword into a bucket of water. Steam goes everywhere. That violent cooling instantly freezes the metal's internal structure, which makes it incredibly hard, but also very brittle. And that is exactly why hardening is almost never the final step. A freshly quenched piece of steel is often way too brittle, almost like glass. So to fix this, it's gently reheated in a process called tempering. This step is so important because you sacrifice just a little bit of that extreme hardness to relieve internal stress and gain a massive amount of toughness. Okay, so we know the process now, but what is actually going on deep inside the metal? Let's zoom way in, down to the microscopic level to see the real transformation happen. Yeah, this is where the real science is. The heating and cooling aren't just changing the temperature, they are fundamentally rearranging the very atoms that make up the metal itself. The secret to all of this lies in something called the microstructure. You can think of it as the metal's internal blueprint, or its DNA. It's the way its tiny little crystalline grains are arranged. And this invisible architecture is what determines all the properties we can actually see and feel, like its hardness and its strength. And this slide just shows the difference perfectly. Before you treat it, the metal's internal grains are kind of large and disorganized, which makes it weak. But heat treatment forces those grains to completely reform into a much smaller, tighter, more interlocking structure. And that new, refined structure is what gives the metal its incredible strength and toughness. So by reshaping that microstructure, we essentially become material architects. We can dial up the hardness, we can boost the toughness, we can control how much it can bend, reduce how brittle it is, and even get rid of hidden internal stress from the manufacturing process.
And just to be super clear on two of the most important goals here, hardness is a material's ability to resist getting scratched or dented. Think of a metal file. Toughness, on the other hand, is its ability to absorb a big impact without shattering. Think of a hammer. You can be hard but not tough, or tough but not hard. Heat treatment lets us engineer that perfect balance.
So the key takeaway here is this. Heat treatment really is a kind of modern alchemy. It's the science of transforming a basic, off-the-shelf metal into a high-performance material that's perfectly designed for its job, whether that's becoming a razor-sharp blade, a flexible spring, or a gear that has to withstand incredible forces. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? We've spent centuries perfecting this science for metals, but if a simple cycle of heating and cooling can completely rewrite a material's internal architecture, what other materials are out there, just waiting for us to figure out the right recipe to unlock their own hidden potential?